Cabinet consideration.
Okay, thank you. I want to move on to air noise, in particular with relation to air noise experienced by residents around Brisbane and Melbourne airports. Got the right people at the table?
Yes.
We'll be able to talk generally to you, Senator.
Phil's coming up.
Thank you. The statement of expectations for Air Services Australia for the period 15th of July 2019 to the 30th of June 2021, issued by the Deputy Prime Minister, or the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development, requires Air Services to provide appropriate resourcing of the Noise Complaints and Information Service to continue to improve the flow and quality of information to noise-affected communities. Does the department require the Air Services NCIS team to do anything other than providing noise information?
To the best of my knowledge, the way that Air Services manages that function is a responsibility of Air Services.
Right, but does the department require anything more of Air Services other than providing noise information?
That's my understanding, but Mr McClure might have more detail, I don't know.
Phil McClure, Assistant Secretary of Airports. No, the process is managed by Air Services. It's their responsibility under their charter to manage that process, but beyond that there's no specific responsibilities.
So we don't give them further detailed guidance, Senator.
And you don't require anything of them other than providing noise information. So you don't require them to sort of proactively advocate for international best practice noise abatement strategies?
As I said, it's the responsibility of Air Services to manage that process, and I'm sure they take into consideration all those matters and best practice.
I ask these questions of Air Services, but what I want to know is what the department requires of Air Services.
We don't provide them any specific instruction about how they undertake that duty.
Right, so you don't require them to undertake best practice noise abatement strategies.
So they're a government entity in their own right. So they have the responsibility to do those things. They're on tomorrow though, so...
Yes, I know. I will be questioning them as well. So I want to go to the issue of the Australian noise exposure forecasts, which form a significant component of an airport's major development plans. And I want to go to the issue of the significant discrepancy between the noise exposure levels forecast by Air Services ANEF, the Australian Noise Exposure Forecast, and the noise exposure that is experienced. Both, in fact, I've got some questions regarding specifically Brisbane, but I know it's also an issue in Melbourne. And so what action does the department take when airport operations don't actually conform to their ANEF? So when there is this discrepancy between this is what's forecast in terms of noise and this is the reality of what's experienced on the ground?
Senator, through the major development plan process and the airport planning process generally, we have guidelines. We work with the airport leasing companies. Are you asking about remedial action in particular?
Well, I'm asking whatever action. Basically, you've got these forecasts that form part of the approval process, and then you've got the operations on the ground where you've got noise which is actually quite different to what the forecasts were. And so I'm wondering what does the department do about that?
So I think, Senator, it's fair to say that forecasts are only that they're forecasts, and Air Services and Brisbane Airport continually monitor. Specifically in regards to Brisbane, coming the 12 months of opening the new runway, the Air Services will be undertaking their post-implementation review, starting off in about July, which will look specifically around those issues of what was forecast, where those the flight paths are, and look at what opportunities there might be to tweak those. But that, again, probably best Air Services talk more to that process.
But the department's got the overall regulatory oversight, haven't you?
The responsibilities for selecting flight paths and managing the safety in and out of the airport's Air Services.
So we're responsible for the planning aspects, and so in the lead up to giving approvals for major works such as a new runway, then we have a role through the MDP process. Once it's live and it's an actual functioning piece of the airport in an operational sense and in that noise sense, it's Air Services. We will, of course, continue to have an interest by virtue of our ongoing relationship with the airport leasing companies and their efforts to ensure that the communities around the airports are listened to and heard.
So has the department taken any steps, or will they take any steps to rectify what is currently being experienced in Brisbane as Air Services' own noise and flight path monitoring systems and the large volumes of complaints? You've got this big discrepancy. Is the department going to take any steps?
Senator, I think we would need to see the outcomes of the post-implementation review and then have a conversation with Air Services. I think, you know, and this is just based on my conversation with the airport owners, leasing companies, you know, they are continually looking for ways to improve the information, to make adjustments if they can. But in terms of undoing approvals, I can't see the department doing that.
Okay. Has the department done any sort of internal modelling or calculations to estimate the financial and economic losses that have been experienced by Brisbane residents as a result of Air Services' flight path design and the impact on decreased productivity, decline in property values, reduced livability of residential areas, and the toll on people, particularly children's ability to learn and study, and people's physical and mental health?
I'm not aware of any, and I would be surprised if we had done any.